Hello and welcome back to Build It with Ben. It's been a while. So this is a Hogwarts Expert's reaction to the gameplay showcase of Hogwarts Legacy. What particularly excited me was that they gave a tour of Hogwarts, and obviously as the internet's resident Hogwarts expert, in inverted commas, I was particularly interested in that section. Let's start with my first impressions of the showcase overall. I kind of love their vision for the castle. It's their own interpretation of the castle and it definitely has a lot of new elements in it, but it also incorporates recreations of areas specifically from the films and also some nice little touches from the books as well. And I particularly love the detail they've put into the castle, how every wall feels grand and decorated and rich in detail, in a way that kind of improves upon the realisation of Hogwarts in the films, because in the films, often a lot of the walls in the background are just kind of plain stone. However, in this game, every inch of the corridors you're in feels like it's lived in, it feels like it's detailed and more magical. In particular, the two standout rooms from this gameplay were definitely the Hufflepuff Common Room and the Defence Against the Dark Arts classroom for me. Both of those just looked gorgeous. The way they were designed, the way the lighting was done, just makes them look amazing. However, as a Hogwarts expert, how does this version of the castle compare to the version in the films? Now, if you want to hear my thoughts on this version of the castle in general, it might be best to watch my previous video because a lot more revealed in the last gameplay. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the new things I noticed in this gameplay showcase. Now, firstly, I was right when I speculated that the Grand Staircase Tower is no longer rectangular in the game and it's instead circular. This turned out to be true.
Little glimpse of the Grand Staircase here. We're not gonna...
Circular staircase.
all the portraits.
I'm a little bit disappointed about this because the Grand Staircase Tower in particular was something that was particularly iconic from the films. I would have kind of preferred if they'd just recreated that, 100% accurately. But, it's their choice, and they did make a good point that, and this is something that's bugged me, by the way, that obviously the tower itself from the outside is circular, so it would make sense that the inside of it would be circular as well. So, I understand where they're coming from. One thing I was wrong about in my previous video was that I thought they'd moved Hagrid's hut. But actually, when they were doing the tour of the castle, it looks like Hagrid's hut is still there in its Prisoner of Azkaban location. What was really apparent in this new gameplay showcase is they've created whole new areas which are new for the game. For example, this central hub. This makes sense. They're creating a new AAA game. It kind of makes sense to create these hub areas where you can get to other locations easily and things like that. So that makes sense to me that they've done that. And also the section that built this in is an area of Hogwarts called the East Wing, and the inside of the East Wing has always been very vague. They've never really plotted out in the films. In the video game adaptations of the films, they had a few corridors and stuff in it, but it's fair to use a bit of artistic license and create new areas within that section of the castle. However, the rough layout of how you get to certain areas, like how you get to the Transfiguration Courtyard, and it's all pretty much the same as how it's laid out in the films, just with new areas incorporated in there. One thing I do quite like is they have incorporated the Chamber of Reception and the entrance courtyard together for the first time in Hogwarts. Now, if you're not aware, basically the entrance courtyard, which you can see from Goblet of Fire onwards, that leads out from the Great Hall. However, that didn't used to be there. In the first few Harry Potter films, instead, there was the Chamber of Reception, which is those stairs you can see them going up before the sorting ceremony in Philosopher's Stone. So in the films, these two never existed at the same time. The Chamber of Reception was replaced by the entrance courtyard. So it's kind of neat to see both these areas brought together for the first time. It gives you a bit of a flavour then of both the early films and the later films. The area outside the Great Hall has also been redesigned to have more verticality. Is that a word? Basically, there's a lot more stairs and levels to it, which means that everything's not just on the same level. And this is something I've kind of noticed throughout a lot of the locations shown in this gameplay showcase, is that even the recognisable areas you can see, like the lobby outside the Great Hall or the Defence Against the Dark Arts classroom, their layout is quite faithful to the films. However, they're a lot more intricately detailed than before. Another thing I noticed as a Hogwarts expert is the Hufflepuff Common Room is in the right place. In the books, it's described as being near the kitchens, and the kitchens are meant to be directly beneath the Great Hall. So from this kind of tour of Hogwarts, you can see that they've got the right location for the Hufflepuff Common Room. So that's quite exciting. So overall, the layout is pretty similar to the films, but with new areas incorporated into it and a lot more detail added. And like I say, I like this combination. It's similar to the films, it's close enough that it's recognisable, but with their own spin on it. And the fact it's a video game means that they can kind of push it a bit further than the films did and make it a bit more of a magical location. However, I do just want to talk about a few concerns that I have for the game based off this gameplay showcase. already you could kind of see some of the limitations they've had during the process of making the game. And we all know about the delays that have been kind of happening. I imagine behind the scenes it's been quite a rush to the finish line, and there's been a lot of pressure, and I have a lot of sympathy for them in that regards. But in this video they do describe a few gameplay features which they've had to cut in order to get the game finished. And it's good that they're being honest about it. So for example, they said that you can't play gobstones, you can't play wizard's chess, which I'm particularly disappointed about because I love that element of the older games. There's no gameplay element to house points, even though they have the house point counters there. There's no playable Quidditch as well, which is something that's come out. And like I say, they had to make calls, and they probably focused on the big elements of the game, which are actually going to be remembered more fondly than wizard's chess. The actual combat or the castle, or they've had to prioritise bigger things. But it is a bit of a shame. And what I hope is that maybe these things could be added back in future DLCs. You could add a specific DLC just for games, and then you could bring in Quidditch, wizard's chess and gobstones. So I think there's a chance that the game could be improved over time. Which brings me on to one of my other fears, which is when they mentioned that it's more narrative based rather than a simulation game.
So tell us how classes work.
Yeah, so ultimately decided not to go the sim route. And so there are opportunities to study, so to speak, like with that.
Right.
But they do all take the form of our mission structure.
Mm-hmm.
That worries me a little bit. I worry that that choice to make it more story focused rather than just kind of like an RPG kind of sim could be a mistake, because I think a lot of people aren't interested in playing this game for the story. They just want to feel like they're a student at Hogwarts. In the trailers, when they mentioned like the Goblin Uprising or whatever it is, I kind of started to turn off. I was like, I don't care. That's not what I want to play the game for. I just want to feel like I'm a student. I don't want it to be like just a very linear path of like, you do this mission, then you do this mission, then you do this mission. I want there to be a lot of kind of like personalization in there and creating my own story rather than following a story that's locked in. So we'll see. But when it comes to the creation of the castle itself, I think they've done an amazing job. I'm really happy that they haven't just created a completely new castle. It still feels recognisable to the films, but with their own spin. And the more I see of it, the more excited I get. So, bring on February.